for the panel, how have you been surprised by the way your community has adopted AM? What were some of the hurdles and the concerns that you all had to overcome?
AM's been adopted broadly by the NAVC community. I'm not surprised by that. We have lots of really smart, creative, passionate problem solvers, and AM is the perfect tool to add to the repertoire of people like that. Generally, we had a couple hurdles we had to overcome to expand its use broadly. I'm sure that folks will talk about the issues with qualifying new manufacturing processes, especially something like additive manufacturing, where there's just a lot of variables, especially in context with other manufacturing processes. So at NAVC anyway, we established a technical warrant holder who has kind of technical authority over that process, who develops and owns standards in regards to that process. So we can make sure things are produced repeatably and reliably across different sites and different industrial sites especially. We've been working to integrate it into our supply chain. So, 2 kilo reports and kind of the standard 3M process for ships and submarines. I'm trying to incorporate additive manufacturing into those systems so that we can respond quickly with 3D printed solutions. And working the whole networking aspect, right? So right now, most of our printers are standalone, and we're working to establish a digital manufacturing enclave so we can get the benefits of networking those capabilities and still be able to upgrade the equipment pretty readily and rapidly from within an enclave. And then on the C side, we've been very interested in doing a lot of work to establish AM capability afloat. So last year, we installed advanced manufacturing suites with additive and laser cutting and CNC and some other equipment on 8 ships as sort of a test case. This year, we're doing R&D to expand the capability of what that provides, but not only making sure that a printer can work in a manufacturing floor, but that it can actually work, in an afloat environment, and that it's ruggedized enough to support is another hurdle that we've been putting a lot of effort against, especially recently.
Yeah, it's so we're we're a little bit different. We're probably one of the later comers to AM as far as the Dawn Enterprise goes, and we're expeditionary. We initially started off mostly servicing the naval construction forces. Though we're about to pick up the lead for the Navy Expeditionary Combat Enterprise, which include EOD, Coastal Riverine, Naval Expeditionary Logistics Support Group, and some others. So what we've been doing is sort of an on-ramping process to follow the lead of other expeditionary forces, mostly the Marine Corps. So taking advantage of a lot of the development that's already happened that NAVC has helped the Marines with. So looking at their tactical fabrication kits initially and getting those out into field training exercises, whether CONUS or OCONUS, to allow users to start telling us how well they work, what are the differences, that exist between our Navy Expeditionary Combat Enterprises and the Marines, their unique aspects. So yeah, we're learning some things along the way and kind of standing up the organization as we go. But it's been really, really eye-opening. And again, this COVID response here, we're kind of focusing, I would say, more on the operational aspect versus a lot of organizations that have done this for a few years, and they're getting into RDT&E aspects of AM and QualCert and all of that. So we're leveraging a lot of efforts that have happened in those organizations already, and I would say that, but we're fairly well along on getting it into the forces, using the forces, collaboration, at a lower level. So we've got some agreements in place that allow us to work directly with future ops officers at units, so we can reach out to them directly, and by virtue of that relationship, sort of a memorandum of agreement, we're allowed to say, hey, we think this is a good idea. Can we get this into an exercise tomorrow, or deliver some AM parts to say a ship asset or something like that, and we can literally get a response the same day and deliver something tomorrow. So that part has been really effective. So we've kind of taken the approach of going after the operational side of it first, and as we have those, looking into standing up a program of record is one of the things that we're working with OpNav for right now from the Navy Expeditionary Combat Enterprise side. So yeah, I guess some of the challenges would be standing up all of these things simultaneously. It's a little bit like a bulldozer trying to push a bunch of tiny rocks. It gets, you have to be careful not to lose too many things and advance too many things simultaneously. But yeah, we're very fortunate to have people like Ben and NavC and Elizabeth Michael at NavAir and Kristen Holsworth to stand on the shoulders of their work. So really thankful for that.
Perfect. So yeah, I really enjoy this question because I think one of the biggest surprises I've seen over the past 4 or 5 years, and Matt, I'm sure you can, share your thoughts in the same way that I've been so surprised by how enthusiastically AM has been adopted, and really just how the Marines have really pushed some of our commercial and industry partners. And so we have a couple use cases to share with respect to that. So from the Marine Corps side, we've been working on construction scale additive manufacturing, so really large scale concrete 3D printing, and I've worked with a company, Icon, an Austin-based company that was really developing it for residential applications to address home insecurity. And in working with them, they were really looking for a handful of ideas on maybe some structures that would be useful to the Marine Corps. And at the end of an hour-long session, I mean, it looked like their heads were about to explode because, they had over a dozen ideas, and really a lot of them aligned in terms of their roadmap, 5-6 years down the road, where the Marines said, hey, we have clear guidance where we're looking towards an expeditionary advanced space operations scenario. So we want to print floating concrete. We'd like to develop modular causeways. So again, just very forward-leaning approach there. And a second use case, we've been very fortunate to have great industry partners across HP. So as I'm sure all of you have seen from their launch last September, they've announced they're delving into metal. And we've had our Marines working on their equipment for about the past 8 months or so, and have really pioneered new business models in terms of identifying that while some of this very aggressive equipment might not be in line with the infrastructure we have on our bases, that we can really find ways to adapt and overcome, and instead send our super users to their sites to utilize the equipment. So again, just really been very pleasantly surprised in terms of how enthusiastically it's been adopted, and just the forward-leaning nature of every stakeholder. I think we've been very fortunate in the Marine Corps to have our program offices really recognize the utility and value of AM and be interested in collaborating with us extensively as well.
Okay, so I'll say 2 things. First off, we've been extraordinarily lucky, and I actually, if you want to talk about surprise, I have been somewhat humbled by the consistency of senior leadership support, despite the fact that this is a challenging technology to people who don't understand it, and even to those of us who do understand it. So if you want to talk about surprise, I've been pleasantly surprised by how senior leadership has stood behind us, even when we were still working our way through this, in terms of the ability to use it, the right way to manage it, the right way to address risk when we go after it. So that's really been, for me, without that level of support, we would not have been able to lean forward, because we would have been overwhelmed by, I think, the legitimate concerns, but also the culture that is somewhat resistant to change in any kind of big bureaucracy, and that's what military often is. And obviously the Marines have been awesome leaning forward without them leaning forward, and I've honestly been surprised by how fast they move sometimes. We would not have been able to you know, move forward for aviation because the Marines set the tone for that. So I've been pleasantly surprised about that. The hurdles have been cultural, not technical. And people talk about, you know, there's a culture of can't sometimes. The culture of can't says, I can't do this, why not? Because we don't do that. And so that hurdle is something that isn't easily overcome unless you can demonstrate over and over again why you should overcome it. And we've been fortunate with that. I think from my perspective, we need to change the conversation about where AM fits. Because the hurdle now is that people are going to put AM in a place where it's just a manufacturing technology. When maybe it's more than that if you integrate it into something like the Internet of Things or Internet of Military Things, and it becomes just one of those devices that's integrated across that whole data and network.
I do want to comment on something that you brought up, Liz. The Marine Corps is able to move very quickly with things like adoption of AM and putting as far forward as possible, but we're completely dependent upon the backlog of work that comes out of people like Jen and ONR and NAVAIR, NAVC, because our barrier to entry is so much lower, especially on the ground side equipment. So, I mean, if something goes wrong, it's not going to fall out of the sky. And we honestly don't have the deep engineering aspect like you guys have at your labs to go through and answer those technical questions. So we can focus on the adoption side of putting it in the hands of the fleet users, but we're completely dependent upon it being backfilled by that, because without that, in the long term, we will suffer for it. So it's very much a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, I understand and concur. I do think, though, the technical follows the leadership. In other words, we can go faster technically if we've got that right level of support and engagement that shows the utility quickly.